All right, welcome back. Dr. Montero Hoingeru-Unicol, our IASTE Vice President, will lead the keynote session. Montero.
Good afternoon, good morning, good evening, colleagues from around the world. It's my honor to be here with you for the first keynote session, and I'm delighted to introduce our first keynote speaker, Professor Puay-peng Ho. Professor Ho has had a long association with IASTE dating back over 25 years. He was conference advisor in the 8th IASTE conference, which was held in Hong Kong, and he is today our opening keynote speaker for our 17th IASTE biennial conference. Professor Ho is head of the Department of Architecture at the National University of Singapore, where he holds the UNESCO Chair on Architectural Heritage Conservation and Management in Asia. He has served as an expert in various UNESCO initiatives related to heritage, particularly regarding the sustainable management of heritage. Prior to joining NUS in 2017, he served as director of the School of Architecture and University Dean of Students at the Chinese University of Hong Kong. His main research interests are in architectural history and conservation practices, and how knowledge can be translated into teaching and practice. Professor Ho serves on many public and private boards and committees, including patron of the International Dunhuang Project of the British Library, reflecting his leading scholarship at this renowned site. And in fact, he will share with us insights about the site during his talk today, immersing the past, mediating the present, ontological framing of digital space in traditional environments. His talk had special resonance with the conference track on theorizing the virtual and the traditional in the built environment, which will address the engagement with and reproduction of tradition and heritage in contemporary digitally driven societies. Professor Ho, you have the floor.
Thank you, Montero. I cannot start my video. Oh, I see. Okay. All right, here we go. Yes, thank you very much, Montero, and really wonderful to be able to join this conference as a keynote speaker. I am trying to share my screen. Oh, how come I cannot share my screen?
You see the green box at the bottom that says share screen?
Yes, I could not
click on that.
Yeah.
And then you pick the screen, desktop, or the tab that you'd like to share.
So, that's what I would normally do, but I can't do it now.
Hisham, can you engage his, there you go, try it again.
Try now.
Yeah. Oh, I need the system access to, okay. I'm sorry about this.
No problem. Imagine that we're in a big lecture hall and all of a sudden the AV goes down and we have to get the audio visual experts with us.
To the grant access. Oh dear. This never happened before, but I just can't see why.
The Zoom gremlins.
Share the screen. It's not the best option, and you just let me know when you want to go on to the next as a backup plan.
Yeah, okay. No, I still cannot do that. So can someone help me with share screen?
Yeah, just give me 1 second. I want to pull up your presentation.
Yeah,
I have it open, so I can do that.
Yeah, why don't you do that, Montero?
Yeah, I'm pulling up your presentation. Just give me 1 second.
That's curious.
Okay.
Can people see it?
All right,
Yeah, we
Montero.
can see it
Yeah.
now.
Okay.
Great, thank you so much.
second.
So I need to say the next place and so on. Okay, right. Yeah, thank you very much for the, yep, that's great. Thank you very much for the invitation. When Nizar just now mentioned about the past ISTA conferences, I remember really with fondness of joining several of the past conferences, including the one in Tunis, in Trani, Hong Kong, and KL, and others. And I think it's a really fantastic tradition that the conference had built up. And in this tradition, how do we look at the heritage? How do we look at the environment? So I will start, next please. On March 16th, 1907, Oriel Stein arrived at the Caves of Thousand Buddhas located outside the town of Dunhuang at the very far western border of China. Next please. There he examined, next please. Yeah, maybe I just raised my finger, yeah, or hands. Yeah, so there he examined, maybe back to the last one, please. Oriel Stein was an explorer of the Central Asia, and here he examined several sites, including Dunhuang and Yuling. But here at Dunhuang, he spent the most time, and he took pictures of the sites, both the outside as well as the inside, and took documentation of the sites, including the plans as well as the mapping of Dunhuang itself. And after he examined the sites and finishing the first day, at the end of the day, he said it was getting dusk before I could tear myself away from this wonderful beehive of temples in a setting of barren rocks and sands. In the dust-laden atmosphere, complete darkness soon overtook us. So there was nothing to interfere with the pictures full of vivid color and grave pomp, all of ages long gone by, which that day's overabundant sightseeing had left impressed on my mind's eyes. And that is his opinion or his emotion at the end of the first day. But by the time Stein left the site 3 months later, he came away with more than just what remained in his mind's eyes, but thousands of ancient manuscripts and hundreds of silk paintings, and also survey maps that we saw just now, and photographs of the sites. And as he said, photographs and exact ground plans were only available means for keeping some record of these remarkable shrines. And they too could be prepared only for a select series among those hundreds and hundreds of caves. 100 years ago, the new technology of photography was deemed to have served to record the heritage that Sir Oriel first encountered. These photographs and documentations can be seen as a form of virtual representation. Together with the impression left in his mind's eyes, they represent a window into the physical experience. However, can the emotion he experienced at the sites be reproducible with this virtual representation? What is virtuality anyway? In the broader sense, any representations of physical heritage can be considered to be virtual, and virtuality can take many forms, one of which is the digital means or the digital heritage, the topic of my presentation here. With the reproduction of high-resolution images of the heritage, such as Dunhuang, next please, allow us or Stein to record the sites of Dunhuang more effectively. Back to the last one, please. As you can see, you have the Dunhuang's cave 172 on the left, taken by Stein, on the right, taken with high resolution images. What is the difference between the two? Can the advances in technology and increasing possibilities for more accurate representation of the heritage be something that will overtaken our understanding of the sites or our appreciation of the sites? This increasing advances in technology that the explorers, the archaeologists, the scholars, the curators often would wish, and with this insatiable wish to push the boundary in recording and documenting the remarkable heritage they encounter. These wishes are partly fulfilled by one technological advance and yet another. And this demands for better and more comprehensive coverage and documentation of heritage are also the driving forces for newer technology, such as the rampant digital technology used in the last 3 decades. How do we understand what this digital technologies might do for the audience over the last 2 decades? just like what photography did for heritage studies many decades before. I'm proposing that an ontological framing of heritage is needed before we are able to conceptualize the nature of virtual representation and explore their appropriateness and use to their full potential. The recent discourse in virtual simulation and representation has centered on the nature and effect of virtual representation. Questions relating to authenticity, sometimes defined as the dichotomy of real or fake, have been widely discussed and sometimes rejected. Fiona Cameron suggested that, and I quote, "A virtual object carries the message of the real while functioning as a sign. It takes on the physical referential of the real, in which a rational, disciplinary-based discourse remains a key element." End of quote. In this narrative, the virtual representation is seen as a separate object and not necessarily seen as a completely identical to the physical objects, but only as a sign to the real or the original object. The nature of the sign can vary and need not take the form of the original fully or accurately, in which case we might be able to bypass the concept of resemblance, likeness, or accuracy, as the requirement for a sign is only to evoke the connaissance of the original. This is particularly true of certain representations that have been popularly branded, such as directly the flying apsaras of Dunhuang, or more visually rich as the image of the cave itself. In this day and age, virtual simulations of all forms has been fully integrated into a common experience of every day through gaming and commercial promotion. In these representations of varying intention, the audience are mostly aware that what they see or experience are not the real thing. They might have represented or signed the original heritage sufficiently for identification, appreciation, and action. Digital virtuality have been so ingrained in our collective everyday life that it is no longer exceptional, particularly over the last 2 years with the pandemic, as we mentioned just now, when we zoom in and zoom out and framing our existence in the remote, virtual, and hybrid world. As Latour and Lower observe, and I quote, "Virtual representation of art and heritage flooded the website so much so that we consider the virtual as yet another world, in parallel or in tandem with our physical world. The question of authenticity becomes irrelevant, as the virtual is as real and representational as physical." End of quote. Similarly, Stefan Weil suggests that it would not be helpful to discuss the virtual representation in the frame of digital, physical, or virtual real. The way to rise above this digital dualism, as suggested by Weil, is to consider, and I quote, "the unprecedented phenomenality of digital beings," end of quote, which he termed ontophony. I would suggest that authenticity to the representation itself, as reference to the physical, is still necessary for realizing the potential of the heritage. The authenticity here is defined as the essence of the heritage. It is thus useful for the construction of an ontological framework to conceptualize this essence, which is also the essence of the heritage to pass down to the next generation. The ontology of heritage is about the essence embodied in the defining elements of the heritage, be it the archaeological site, architecture, objects, or intangible traditions. The essence emanates, for example, from these two images, from the meaning of the heritage represented by the two images here, both for the contemporaneous generations of the heritage that is interpreted in our current time. Now, heritage is about human achievement that we identify with, value, and significance to pass down to future generation. The passing down of the essence and meaning of the heritage might be through different forms of representation: physical, oral, audio, written, visual, or digital. Regardless of physical or virtual representation in various forms, meaning and identity can be inferred with equal vigor. This interpretation of the past can embody different meanings and is usually achieved through careful reading and research of the objects and heritage, or virtual objects or heritage, and appropriate use and selection of digital technology. This is similar to the process of technology advances over the last 100 years, as seen in the representation of the heritage at Dunhuang, which I will take us through in this presentation. Back on Dunhuang, hot on the hills of Stein, French philologist and explorer Paul Palio, arrived at the cave temple site in 1908 and systematically planned the documentation of the sites. This meticulously planned photographs, together with the detailed notes of Palio, plans, and maps, can be considered to be first comprehensive documentation of the 492 decorated caves at Dunhuang, Caves of Thousand Buddhas, or known today as the Mogao Cave Temples. Soon after Palio returned to Paris, he set about publishing the result of his documentation of the caves in 6 volumes between 1920s and 24. Palio suggested recording of the caves and subsequent publication to, and I quote, imply the freedom to go back and forth from one another. That is only possible when all the plates are published. And this is the reason why we first gave our photographs, end of quote. Clearly, the comprehensive recording, the publication, and the availability of these images in early 20th century have been instrumental in the promotion of Dunhuang as a heritage of China and further of human civilization. The representation of the form of documentation published by Palio allows worldwide accessibility, aiding in the creation of meaning for the heritage. The next major documentation of Mogao cave temples involved the husband and wife team of James and Lucy Low, who spent more than 18 months at Dunhuang between 1943 and 44. The extensive number of photographs taken had always been a good resource for researchers in the past, but with the recent publication, I mean, 2 months ago, I received the 9 volumes in 2021. The full significance of the archive, with more than 3,000 images now housed in the Princeton University, can be realized both in the scholarly work, but also energizing the wider public. The comprehensiveness of and good resolution, coupled with in-depth research, would more than publicize the heritage, but also serve as an important educational purpose. And with these 2 images that James Low took, you see the ambience of the cave itself being portrayed that we don't see in future or later reproduction. So with the bodhisattva in the front and the painting at the back, or the bodhisattva from the back and looking into the painting itself in both caves, really you see this sense of emotion that comes through their photography. But with modern, from the 1960s onward, with modern photography, color images of wall paintings from the cave became the new standard. And in this case, in James C. Low workshop, the images that they captured have been compared with the colors of the original caves. In one instance, like the one on the right in Yuning Cave 25, as well as the one on the left, where you see a reproduction of the color as close as possible to the origin. So this becomes a new standard, and thereby unleashing the full glory of the colorful paintings, as well as the subtlety of the shades and variations in the rich fresco. Now, starting in the last decade of the 20th century, digital technology started to be used extensively for representing Dunhuang art for research and education and enjoyment. These are some of the James Low's photographs within the same archive. One of the earliest scholars working with digital technology is Sarah Fraser, at the time at Northwestern University. She helmed a documentation project between 1999 and 2004. Using high-resolution photography, the project aimed at documenting 25 cave interiors that will allow scholars to examine the wall painting microscopically. The other outputs of this project was a 3D simulation using QuickTime VR technique. And the images from this project have been included in Mellon International Dunhuang Archive, deposited on ArtStore. Such digital technology and online platforms allowed for interpretation with accurate representation through off-site accessibility. Now, this is a particular 3-dimensional representation using the images from Sarah's research. And with a goggle, you are able to see the 3-dimensionality of the cave itself. Now we can turn to the view of the audience, as in this 3D simulation. The intention of preserving heritage is usually said to be for learning and for enjoyment. How do we transmit this purpose with a multitude of interpretation to the audience? Visiting the physical heritage would allow several purposes to be fulfilled. Can the same purposes be achieved with digital representation of heritage? I believe it can and should. What might be the specification for digital representation to adopt if these intentions are to be fulfilled? In learning, the entirety of knowledge that are generated by the heritage would be the target to achieve. In the case of Cave Temple at Dunhuang, religious history and practices, social and political history, artistic traditions and skills, architectural construction and form, cultural exchanges are some of the many aspects of the whole of knowledge emanating from the physical heritage or its physical or its digital representation. The interpretation of the site has to be based on research by a plethora of scholars working on the materials and on-site or off-site. The digital platforms that I mentioned previously would allow such research to be carried out with precise and accurate representations. The open accessibility of these materials online would also encourage more scholars of different disciplines to collaborate and contribute to the interpretation of the heritage. Regarding the audience, can third-person gaze be translated into first-person empathy? What advantage does digital technology have over the physical heritage? What mode of interpretation can be achieved through digital means? Or more accurately, what can be achieved through digital simulation, which cannot be achieved through physical experience? In the case of Dunhuang, the Friends of Dunhuang was set up in Hong Kong in 2010, of which I'm a member. And one of the projects supported by donation is the digitization of the interior of the caves at Dunhuang. The documented process had been now perfected with super high resolution images taken from more than 100 caves. One of this is cave 217, represented by this image. The resolution that you see is really very, very much pared down, but the one that I received would be more than 1 gigabyte in resolution. Many products were also created using these high resolution images. The Dunhuang Research Academy has created an e-Dunhuang platform for displaying images from about 30 caves. These 30 caves are representative caves of Dunhuang art from the 5th to the 14th centuries and are generally well preserved. The internet platforms allow for full view of each cave with a short descriptions of the caves and the content of the wall paintings. There's also a 3D walkthrough that the audience can control, including zooming in and out of the different parts of the wall. The 3D models of the caves can also be navigated through web VR. And in this case, you can just go in to the caves and look around the caves and maybe zoom in to some details. But there's also a 3D model of the caves that can be used at the home with web VR using your own goggle. The products thus satisfy the educational needs of general public, particularly with the close-up views of wall painting and surfaces. The 3D walkthrough can also convey a sense of space to the audience. The immersive experience is excellent for home application, but the actual high-resolution photographs can be obtained from Dunhuang Research Academy for really very in-depth research purposes. Some of the corners, like the top corners of the caves, as you can see here, might not be seen with the naked eyes, but that could be enlarged on that high-resolution images. So I was planning a book in Hong Kong to detail the unseen Dunhuang, meaning that some of these parts of Dunhuang that are so minuscule that cannot be seen with naked eyes can now be seen with these high-resolution images. Now, coming back to the immersive experience, does it aid our learning or our enjoyment? As I expressed earlier, a digital representation should be seen to be a different entity apart from the heritage itself. It will certainly take reference from the physical heritage. However, digital heritage should not be treated as a surrogate of the actual heritage site, and there's no need to. In which case, the experiences gained from the immersive environment need not necessarily yield the same experiences as might be gained from the physical heritage. There are certainly many aspects of physical experiences that might be replicated visually, and authenticated with digital means. When we look at the wall paintings in Dunhuang, we look at the overall cave site, the individual cave interior, and different walls and ceilings. We'll spend most of our time scrutinizing every inch of the wall surfaces, looking at the details of the painting with a torch as the interior is not illuminated. The vision is often limited to a square foot under the lights. This can be fully replicated with digital means and achieving even better results than the physical experience, which I will come to later on. As detailed images in high location cannot be seen with naked eyes, thus a digital reproduction with super high resolution would aid the vision much better than just using a torch. With these high resolution images created through the digitization project, Professor Jeffrey Shaw, the founding director of the School of Creative Media at the City University of Hong Kong, had created several products over the years. The major output is Pure Land 360, created in 2012. On the website, they proclaimed that the project, and I quote, immerses visitors in the quintessential heritage of Dunhuang's Buddhist grotto temples, which constitute an art treasure abounding with murals, statues, and architectural monuments. The effect that was achieved with the 360 projection is set by the team as Pure Land take place in AV 2006, a large 360-degree panoramic stereoscopic projection theater, which offers a true-to-life experience of being inside a cave temple and viewing its magnificent Buddhist wall painting at 1:1 scale. Using the high-resolution photography and laser scan models specially provided by the Dunhuang Academy, Pure Land constitutes an immersive virtual facsimile that reframes and reconstitutes the extraordinary wealth of paintings and sculptures found in the cave of Dunhuang. The two phrases that I would like to highlight, true to life experience and immersive virtual facsimile, are really a fantastic claim. Are they achieved? Can a visit to the immersive theater of the facsimile of the caves equivalent to the real life experience? Now, there are two additional devices used by the curators to approximate the experience. Next, please. The first is as they claim, and I quote, this augmented reality interaction design includes a virtual torch that simulates the real-world experience of visiting the caves, where the viewer handles a small LED flashlight to illuminate the paintings. And this, and end of quote, such as the one that you see at the bottom. This simulation of the real-life experience of a visitor to the cave is more of a visual experience, in that with the torch, your vision is focused on a small area of the wall, while the entire interior remains in dim lights. Now, the second device is a virtual magnifying glass, as you can see there, that lets the viewer zoom in and zoom out with and view the paintings in ultra-high resolution through a 3D lens that can be enlarged to full screen heights. And of course, this feature allows us to really see the details of the painting very closely. And finally, the other schemes that they put in were to highlight the musical instruments on the right and show dancer dancing as from the wall itself to the left. So the total immersive experience not only includes the simulation of the space of the cave, but also relates to some educational purposes with highlighting several parts of the images of the paintings. So this might be related to the intention of the team to create an embodied experience or embodied museography. Now, next please. Yeah. So this is the experience on real life. Oh, back to the one. Yeah, you can see me introducing the caves to a number of audiences. This is taken by someone illegally, but given to me, so I can show it here. So don't show it to Dunhuang Academy. But this is showing within the cave that you use a torch, and some use really very high power torch. So you can see images on the top. But using a torch, you can see the round circle which I shine at. that I can talk. And that is the same kind of experience that you see with Jeffrey Shaw's recreation. Now, there are two further projects curated by Shaw, spinning off from the high resolution images of Dunhuang. The first one is Pure Land AR, again in 2012, which is a clever exhibition of Cave 220 using track mobile device to visualize the surfaces of the cave within a black box with the same dimension as Cave 220. So the project Pure Land AR is described as demonstrating, and I quote, demonstrating the future of mobile media and augmented reality as a means of virtually embodying one-to-one scale cultural heritage experiences. It creates a space for the conjunction between real and virtual formations that gives transected aesthetic expression to Dunhuang Buddhist art treasure of mural paintings and sculpture, end of quote. In this particular installation or exhibition, you can see that the cave is recreated to the same dimension, but as a black hole. And you are able to use an iPad and look into the caves. And when you look into the cave and come close to the surfaces, you really zoom in to the wall painting or to the sculpture that is sort of part of the mobile AR device. And that seems to, as the team claim, seems to generates this spontaneous virtual tourism because everybody is doing this and everybody taking iPad of everyone else doing this zooming. Then the last project of the trilogy of Pure Land projects was completed 3 years later in 2015 and exhibited in two places, which is called the Pure Land Unwired. And it's totally similar concept as the previous one, except that it's much more immersive, so that you can see that the viewer will carry a high power computer and with a camera also capturing a movement of the body and the limbs, so that you might be experiencing the cave itself using this backpack that runs the VR software, as you can see, with the hands moving, and so that you are immersed with your body as a surrogate or as an avatar within the space itself. And these are really quite some real achievement by the team Shaw had built up, and 3 or 4 projects that he achieved. And would this be the embodied experience that they seek and we seek for audience education and enjoyment? With greater emphasis on interpretation, I feel that this digital simulation, particularly those accessible from a desktop, or this one in particular with this computer platform that you carry, might be really great for enjoyment, might be also wonderful for educational purposes. And this interpretation that I really would like to emphasize would really make the embodied experience much richer and much more authentic. And so perhaps it's now the time to discuss the issue of authenticity or aura. In the work of art in the age of mechanical reproduction, Walter Benjamin asserts that 2D images such as photographies are poor replica as they do not possess the source of the aura. The aura Benjamin refers to is defined as distance and a reflection of authenticity. Authenticity in the view of Benjamin is the presence, and I quote, the presence of the work of art in time and space, end of quote. So the mechanical or maybe the digital reproduction lacks the patina of time and the depth of space. This is a prime reason for the decay of aura, as he claimed in terms of the photography. In a way, we can also define the aura as the essence of the heritage that allows it to come alive, so that the connection with contemporary audience can be bridged. Without the essence, the virtual representation of the heritage would be a flat replica that would not be able to transcend the virtual experience to full emotional experience. Heritage reproduction in digital means should connect with the audience, which in turn would elicit an emotional response, similar to the response that would be elicited when experiencing the physical heritage. What is then this aura? The feeling of being connected to the physical entity and experience the multi-layer of significance of heritage is probably very hard to describe, but extremely real when experienced. It might involve the sites, atmosphere, material, form, tactility, ventilation, smell, or even the sound emanated from the heritage. It might be induced with movement inside and outside the heritage, or with the alternation of light and darkness, or with the bodily movements going up and down the steps. This ephemeral quality of heritage might not be universal, may not be even constant. However, the aura works to identify the objects or heritage and bridge the gap between itself and the audience. So as long as that connection between the past and the now can be established, and the meaning of the heritage can be illustrated and accepted by the audience, digital representation will be as good as probably the real heritage. So we might also be able to borrow, so this is a cave dome, one of the other projects. Can I come back to this one later? Sorry, I reordered the slides. No, go one more and one more. One more, please. Oh, sorry. So the order is slightly different. But anyway, can you go back to the last two, please? We might also be able to, yeah, this one, please. We might also be able to borrow from the heritage conservation domain the definition of authenticity as the assurance for the maintenance of aura. In NARA Plus 20 conference organized in 2014 by ICOMOS Japan, to further elucidate the concept of authenticity after the first conference in 1994, to them, authenticity is defined as, and I quote, a culturally contingent quality associated with a heritage place, element, or object that is perceived to communicate credibly cultural value. It is recognized as a meaningful expression of an evolving cultural tradition and/or evokes among individuals the social and emotional resonance of group identity. So the key phrases used in this statement are culturally contingent quality, communicates credible cultural value, meaningful expression of an evolving cultural tradition, and emotional resonance of group identity. And perhaps if we look at the authenticity of digital representation through this particular lens, we might be able to see that the emotional resonance of identity can be achieved through excellent interpretation of physical sites through the digital means. So a project that I undertook in cave tablet sites near Beijing, Xiangtangshan, is to use mixed reality combined with AR, VR, and projection mapping to recreate an aura and thereby emotional resonance of the caves in order to bring the cave itself to unite with this particular object, which is featured in this Xiangtangshan cave project of Professor Wu Hong of University of Chicago, that is already bought and exhibited in the museum of my client. And together, when the interpretation was fully researched and installed, and with the complete full story of the cave and the essence of the representation, we hope to bridge the gap and transmit the meaning to the audience. And finally, Dunhuang wall paintings, as well as other traditional environments, were created within a ritualistic context, as pointed out by Benjamin. And I quote, "We know that the earliest artworks originated in the service of a ritual, first the magical, then the religious kind. It is significant that the existence of works of art with reference to its aura is never entirely separated from its ritual function," end of quote. More accurately, the ritualistic dimension of heritage, which might not be applicable only to religious heritage, is an important aspect of the ontological framework which contributes directly to the meaning of the heritage. Dunhuang heritage was not created for entertainment. Rather, the sculpture and paintings are designed with complicated iconography. And some of the wall paintings, like this one here, were used for the ritual of visualizing the Pure Land of the Buddha. The specific steps for visualization practice are outlined in the scripture and expounded by Master Shandao in the 7th century. He promoted the use of painting of this kind, as you see here, as aids for visualization. Shandao himself is said to have painted more than 300 such illustrations in his lifetime. which might be similar to this one here. And he gave really very detailed description how we can use the architecture of the painting as mainly the guide for us to visualize, next please, yeah, to see the Pure Land itself. And different elements of the paintings were highlighted in Shan Dao's description so that we can go from one step to another step, looking at different elements. And when different elements are being shown and being directed, using perhaps a different kind of perspective system that we see in this particular image. And with this very careful construction of vanishing lines and so on, our eyes are sort of focused from one part of the painting to another part, and finally on the Buddha himself. So this illustration can be seen as a virtual representation of a paradisal milieu for the audience to enter. So we are looking at a virtual representation of a paradise, and the directions and the instruction is for us to visualize it so that we can enter into this. And thereby, very similarly, in digital representation that we are capable of producing today, we might be able to do that. So the virtual immersion should be useful to fulfill the ritualistic purpose, thereby contributing to the meaning of the heritage. I'm sure it would be possible if the curators are able to focus on the embodied ritualistic objective of the Pure Land paintings through virtual representation. The ritualistic dimension of heritage is the essence of the heritage. Narrating, embodying, or representing this essence will give the digital project the necessary aura of the physical heritage. The process of visualization will turn the third-person gaze into first-person empathy, as I said earlier. The preservation of heritage serves two main purposes of learning and enjoyment. The authenticity of the digital representation will be able to bring the heritage to life and communicate with the audience emotionally. The success of digital representation is not contingent on the technology, the form of digital representation itself, or the visual or immersive spectacle. Rather, it should be about matching the expectation of the audience with the representation. Virtual heritage is here to stay. The technological advancement will one day be able to achieve spatial immersion, interactivities, realness, parseness, authenticity, and aura of the physical heritage. However, currently, many projects are designed through the technological aspect, rather than curated for the objective of transmission of meaning to the audience. And I have to do it here, as shown in this other illegal picture taken by students in another visit to Dunhuang. This is expressed succinctly by Roger Michael, the founder and executive director of Institute for Digital Archaeology, in his 2016 year-end words for IDA members. And I quote, "People who care about the objects that capture their cultural identity are the only ones who can confer an aura of authenticity on them. And so we always try and work on their behalf," end of quote. And that is really very apt for our conference today. If we cannot visit the site as we did in this image, we might, and if we really use the digital medium that cannot convey the meaning or the aura of authenticity, we might have to agree with Paul Palliot in 1908, who lamented at the end of the visit to Dunhuang and said, and I quote, "No photography or maybe digital representation could convey an impression of the charm which these compositions and those that to be described presently in the large temples derive from their rich and harmonious blended coloring." And I thank you.
Thank you very much to Professor Ho, and now we turn over to Professor Al-Sayad, who will be moderating the questions from the floor.
Well, actually, I have to start by saying I did not receive that many questions yet. Perhaps they are on their way. But in the meantime, I am very familiar with Puay-peng and his work. We share quite a lot in common. So I have a lot of questions myself, which I'm going to start with as some of these questions start to come up.
Ms. Zhao,
Yes.
There's one question in the Q&A.
Yes, I see it, but I'm
Okay.
going to start with some of the other questions. I think that this actually is a question that has come from Professor Ali Raouf, but I will proceed with engaging Puay-peng mainly in this notion of authenticity, which I think is really important. I think your talk raises maybe the important issue is what is it that we can achieve through physical representation that cannot be achieved through virtuality or through simulations, and possibly even the opposite. What can be achieved through, if you will, through simulation that we cannot necessarily experience physically. You showed a few very good examples of the latter. And this again has to do with technology and the power of technology in achieving this very specific issue. But for me, I wanted to raise even a more serious question that has to do with the validity of authenticity as a framework altogether. I think many of us have been stuck with Benjamin and with Benjamin's understanding of the world, which is now almost 100 years old.
Yes.
And I'm trying very much to sort of go beyond that. And in fact, I'm going to share my screen now because I wanted to just use an example that for me illustrates to some extent when is it that authenticity as an idea literally sometimes even stops to be relevant altogether. So here is the example that I will share right now. This is actually something that comes from one of my books. Yes. It is the image of the face of the Statue of Liberty, which was used, as you can see probably on your screen, on the left side. It was used as the image of the Statue of Liberty. But then someone actually discovered later that it was not really the Statue of Liberty that appears on the US official postal stamp, but it's actually rather what appeared in Las Vegas, because there is a replica of it in Las Vegas. What's very interesting here is that when this particular issue was brought to the attention of the US Postal Service, their response was, well, if you look at the real Statue of Liberty, which is the image that you see to your right, it was somewhat unfortunate that the Statue of Liberty, the real Statue of Liberty, was no longer as powerful in conveying its identity because it's worn out. And in a sense, the Postal Service never apologized and continued to issue that first-class stamp, which they actually continued to issue, if you will, forever. And you can see that forever is crossed out. I say that because the notion of basically using the simulated or the representational instead of the original, which may have lost some of its appeal, or even using Benjamin's term, some of its aura, is precisely the reason why authenticity is no longer even a valid framework or criteria to be invoked in understanding what is traditional or even what is heritage anymore. I wanted to just see how you would respond to this at this stage.
Yeah. Thank you, Nessa, for this wonderful comparison. And I really agree with you if authenticity or aura is defined in terms of Benjamin, and that to me is really irrelevant as well. But I would like to use the NARA, partly the conservation kind of definitions on authenticity in the sense of the meaning, of the essence of the heritage. And so to me, both your examples, the actual one in New York and the one on the stamp, are really authentic. Yes. Both are authentic. So both are not, you cannot discriminate one against the other because they were there for a certain purpose. And it doesn't have to be the same or the lookalike or resemble or exact replica, right? And that authenticity to me should be for the stamp. It transmits the idea and the power of the idea of freedom, and that is equally transmitted by the statue and by the stamp. And in fact, as I said just now, the stamp might be even more powerful than the actual statue.
Yes.
Because the actual statue, I mean, they're so tall, right? You can't even see the face of the goddess. And so, in a sense, to me, authenticity is irrelevant because if we define it as exact replica or the resemblance, but it is relevant if we define it as the essence of the heritage itself or the object itself, and that essence had to be transmitted. And whether it is transmitted through a media in digital or the physical or say photographic media, it has to be expressing that meaning. And it could also express another meaning. And therefore, I think the digital media representation can be a separate entity. And maybe it would also express another meaning apart from the actual physical object. And its use within that context, I think, would also be authentic. Yeah.
Very good. Well, this actually raises it. It works very well with the next question that we have, which comes from Professor Ali Raouf. And he's asking that the move towards virtuality is often happening at the expense of reality. So are we really approaching a paradigm where the real heritage is placeless? And it takes us back to this idea of location. I mean, like the beautiful examples that you gave all exist in one particular location, but they can be experienced virtually, if you will, everywhere else. So what's your take on that?
I mean, that's an interesting question. And I feel that wherever I go, if I can have Dunhuang with me, and I have hundreds of books on Dunhuang behind me from different sort of era with different kind of accurate representations. Wherever I go, I can take it with me, and that's superb. But the site itself holds a different magic. Every time I go to Dunhuang, the air that I breathed, the color of the sky, the wind that blows through the trees, and the water, the sound of the water flowing in the river in front of the caves. I mean, all those add a lot of kind of emotion for myself, because it is at that point that I can imagine the community of monks, the community of soldiers that gathered in that place hundreds, thousands of years ago, and chasing off the cave front and doing that kind of physical work. And that I cannot really imagine or even embody it in my experience with the visual representation or the photographic or the virtual representation that I have. And so I think both are really possible. It should not go placeless. It should have the character and the real tactility of the place. Yeah.
Very good. Another question that actually comes to us from Professor Zhen Ren, and he's asking, it seems that the ongoing development of heritage digitization makes unlimited possibilities. And he's just wondering to what extent you think that the overall, that digitization development could facilitate the visibility of those more tacit forms of knowledge, processes, and labor in the making of heritage objects and identities.
I think it's as you say, there's really unlimited possibilities, and as we move forward, the limitation is our own brain, and I think when we really want more, and more can be done, and in a way, I think I've not talked about one possibility or say one merit of this digitization project, and that is to preserve the images. Because the cave is deteriorating, and the condition is getting worse and worse, and the flooding of the rivers and creating a very humid climate really damaged the wall paintings. And so there is really a real concern for conservation of this heritage. And so that I think will be really an important aspect of the digitization developments that you talk about. But I think the way we do research based on those images that we see, with this digitization development, we are really able to use the images in a very extraordinary way. than what I can do when I did my PhD in London, did like 40 years ago. And so in a way, it's really a fantastic resource so that we can generate different forms of knowledge, and therefore we can make better identification of some of this heritage. Yeah.
Very good. We get a question from Dr. Ahmed Al-Kholi in Bahrain, and it's also very interesting because he's suggesting that there's quite a lot of negative impact of digitization, if you will, on the local economy, in that there are many cities that depend on tourism for visits, if you will. And as a result of that, the question then becomes, what happens to the real sites? The ownership of these monuments becomes so universal, if you will. Of course, again, as a UNESCO chair, I'm sure you have some ideas about that more specifically.
I mean, tourism is a double-edged sword, as we all know. And in Dunhuang, they face the issues of over-tourism. And therefore, they really want to stop too many people coming to the site. But anyone who saw the digital representations all wants to go to Dunhuang physically.
Yes.
And so I don't think that will. I mean, it's not a question of this or that, but it's a question of both. So you want both digitization, but also the physical visits.
So you believe that the two are actually mutually constitutive?
Yeah, that's right. They can exist mutually without any issues, without any problems.
Well, let me just give you an example that complicates this a bit, because in some of my research, particularly in my last book, I discovered that the number of people who visit the Eiffel Tower in Las Vegas exceeds the number of people who visit Paris. So the question then becomes, to what extent are we, heading in a direction where the real thing becomes irrelevant because it's more difficult to go to, it's more expensive to go to. And the answers that I got even from some of the visitors was, I don't really have to deal with the French and the fact that they look down on us if we don't speak French. All of these other cultural dimensions. So I just wanted to know how you would respond to that aspect of it.
Yeah, well, I mean, that would be fulfilling one aspect of digital heritage, and that is for enjoyment. So if they enjoyed it, fine. I mean, it doesn't really matter. But for those who really want to enjoy the physical ambience, then they should go. So I have no question. I mean, maybe there's a lot more people going to the casino than going to sip coffee.
I'm sure that's the case. Yes, absolutely. Well, actually, this already answered partly the question that we got from Professor Amir Gohar, also in the UK. Exactly. I have one last question, and I'm just going to use it in our remaining 2 minutes or 3 minutes. And it comes from Professor Andrew Holland. In conclusion of your presentation, you said that the aura of authenticity of the physical experience can be preserved in the visualization of heritage by matching their presentation with the expectations of the audience. But often the power of people's interaction with heritage is that it can challenge their expectations and generate new perceptions of the past and identity. How do we achieve both authenticity and the perceptual change of the physical experience through visualization?
Well, that's a very, very good question. I think I did not develop one segment of my talk more deeply, in the sense that the availability of the digital platform to everyone, and that accessibility really allowed a lot more different interpretations to be have. And so so in a sense, with this availability and the easy accessibility to all these platforms, a lot more research and a lot more interpretation can be achieved. The only issue is where do we post, or where do we cite these interpretations? And therefore that probably is something that we can achieve if we have an open site, so that the interpretations can be added, and so that it can be a kind of a grounding of opinions, and also experts' opinions and so on, through question and answers and through this research, so that the authenticity can be achieved there. But I think your last question, I think, is really difficult to answer. How do we achieve both authenticity and the perceptual challenge of the physical experience? I think that is more difficult to answer. I think perhaps really the technology has to advance so that we might be able to answer your question
Puay-peng, thank you so much for a very, very good talk and an excellent start for this conference. I very much enjoyed it. I'm sure our audience by and large has enjoyed it too. We will hopefully see you again in the concluding session of the conference on Friday. And I turn this back now to Dr. Isa as we actually have the next networking event, which would have actually been a coffee break. So perhaps all of us go and get coffee and still sit on our computers. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Nisa. Thank you, Montira.